Hi and welcome to another street photography video with me, Nick Turpin. In this video I'm going to show you 5 photographers who I think are probably taking better street photographs than you are. So, 5 photographers who are taking better photographs on the street than you are. What I mean by better is probably more interesting. With the increasing popularity of street photography over the last 10 to 20 years, the use of social media, file sharing websites, the various collectives, has created a kind of goldfish bowl where street photographers are operating, all looking and feeding off each other's work. The same images are winning street photography awards time and time again. The whole street photography approach and genre is being criticised for its lack of originality and the development of all the cliches that we're all very familiar with. In the quest for originality, some street photographers have discarded the values that make street photography special, turning to technical novelty like apps and even staging supposedly candid street photographs. As you all know by now, I am in favour of the candid public photograph and the documentary significance that it retains. I want to look at your incredible street photograph and know that it actually happened. That with just the rectangle and the shutter button, you are mentally and physically present enough to record something amazing. We don't need gimmicks. Real life is amazing enough if you can see it. So how do we evolve out of this goldfish bowl that we've found ourselves in? By looking around for inspirational ideas and approaches from those shooting candid public photographs who may not necessarily call themselves street photographers. I addressed this last year at the Street London Festival. I chose the theme of the borders of street photography, and I invited speakers who are photographers perhaps taking candid public photographs, but on the borders of street photography, where street photography meets art, where street photography meets photojournalism. In my own work, I've started working in ways recently that are not considered to be traditional street photography. Perhaps technically I've started using different equipment. I've started shooting on long lenses occasionally. I've started using ideas, a concept, as the basis for a project. And now, rather than just shooting single images, I'm shooting a series of pictures which help me to develop a kind of unique aesthetic for that project. So to be a little provocative and to stimulate you, I've put together the work of 5 photographers who are making candid public photographs, but not in the traditional 35mm rangefinder sort of street photography way. And as a result of that, I think they're probably making more interesting and groundbreaking and forward-looking photographs on the street than you are. Number 1, Nick Hans. Now Nick Hans is a Belgian photographer. He's probably more of a photojournalist or a documentary photographer than a street photographer, but he works, certainly one of those photographers, a bit like Alex Webb, on the border of documentary, but really works with a fabulous cleverness, a wit, social awareness that reminds me of the work of street photographers. He's done several books, including Red Journey, Mediterranean, The Continuity of Man, and Garden of Delight, which is shot in Dubai. The work is beautifully composed, beautifully observed. There's lovely wit going on, visual wit going on in the images, but they are an exploration of a theme, an idea, sort of overarching project which brings everything together. Beautifully composed images. And I really love this work. I've been following Nick's work for some time. Now, is he a street photographer? I don't know. I'm not saying that street photography has to go in this direction. What I'm saying is that we can take things from the work of people working on the fringes like Nick, and that we can use in our own work. We can transplant, we can cross-pollinate from outside of traditional street photography. That rangefinder 35mm look, that sort of the look that a lot of the that's popularized by a lot of the street photography cooperatives and Flickr and Facebook groups. I think we need to be looking outside of that world. So here Nick is definitely addressing themes and ideas about here, for example, Dubai being a sort of Western playground. But he's still very much working with that wit and humour of a street photographer, and you can probably see this crossover. I mean, this, for example, is a terrific classic street photograph, as is this. there's definitely that wit, that humour, that smile in the mind idea, which I think is characteristic of a lot of traditional street photography. Okay, number 2, Carl Baden. Now, Carl Baden is an interesting photographer. I don't think he would probably call himself a street photographer. One of his most well-known projects is for a long series of self-portraits of himself, obviously, growing older over a period of years, shot in black and white. That's something that he's well known for. The project of his that caught my eye is this in and out of the car project, this American cars, where he's shooting the street from the roadside, and he's framing scenes through the passenger window of his car, and he finds the most extraordinary things that he sort of pulls up beside and photographs. And I just found this really unique, really stimulating. Americans use their cars, experience the world, through the car, just because of the nature of the country. And I think this is something which Carl is addressing beautifully in these images. I mean, this one's incredibly simple, for example, isn't it? But incredibly effective. It looks like there's a little bit of lighting in the car just to balance the interior with the exterior visually. But I really love it. I love the way he frames the world, the things he finds, little snapshots, little moments of curbside life. And I just think this is interesting. It's just again, it's not traditional street photography. It's outside of that sort of long kind of, I don't know, heritage going back to Cortège and Cartier-Bresson and so on. These are very contemporary pictures. That's what I like about them. They're very now. And I think that's what we should be doing. We should be photographing our world, in a new way, rather than trying to photograph our world like, Cartier-Bresson did, or any of those traditional 35mm rangefinder street photographers. So that's Carl Baden. Number 3, Olli Curtis. Olli, I discovered last year. I absolutely loved his street scenes. He's been doing a project in the States. He's a British photographer based in Hastings, but he works a lot in the States, and his current project is called Crossroad Blues. And he works on a large format camera, not with a little rangefinder. He sets up early in the morning, as far as I can tell, and he photographs these American street corners, often with a little group of figures or one figure in the beautiful morning light. I got in touch with Olli just to confirm how he worked, that his pictures were candid public photographs, that these are not staged images. So Olli's probably, I think he works as a commercial photographer, but he's also very much an artist. He had an exhibition this year at Hacklebury Fine Art in London. And these are just gorgeous images. He's working with, bellows camera, technical camera with a digital back, and you can see how beautifully he photographs the architecture itself, how all his verticals are perfectly vertical. He creates this very controlled and graphic sort of architectural environment, and then allows a single figure to walk into the scene. So it's about America, it's about these street corners, the idea, he talks about, stopping at a street corner at a don't walk sign and having to consider where you've been and where you're going. And I quite like that that idea. It's a bit of a sort of metaphor for life, isn't it? Beautiful images. Again, probably not a street photographer in his own mind, but very much doing what the street photographer does. Beautiful, aren't they? Quite different. And this is the kind of thing, I mean, you could take this vision of Olli Curtis, and I'm not saying go out and copy what Olli's doing, but I'm just saying the next time you're standing on a street corner in the early hours of the morning or at dusk, consider this as a possible way of working. Number 4, Acorah Naka. Now, Acorah is a Thai photographer, and I came across his work quite recently. I think on a blog post by Rami Narula. I'm going to show you one particular series of his, and which I think shows the strength of shooting a series, whether it starts with a concept or whether it starts with an observation. Now, I suspect this started with a scene that he saw, and thought, this is great, I could shoot more of these, this is a rich vein I could explore, and then went out to seek them out, or looked out for them on his travels. So these are photographs of vines and plants that look, obviously take on a human form, and I just thought this was a really nice series. And I think sometimes if you do see something that strikes you as beautiful or stunning or interesting in some way, it's not a bad idea to kind of lock that away somewhere in your head, and and keep an eye out for more images that you can put together with that. There's a number of photographers who've done that over a period of years, just collected images of the same thing, and eventually produced a book or whatever. And the thing about this is it just produces something which other photographers have not done. And I just find it incredibly exciting and stimulating to see that. Okay, number 5. Now, number 5 is probably a bit of a controversial one. Number 5 is Michael Wolfe, a German photographer living in Hong Kong. And very sadly, I actually emailed Michael about using his pictures pretty much the day that I saw on the news that he had very sadly passed away. And Michael's been picture influence on my own work. I really share his interest in the subject matter of kind of the metropolis and life in big cities. And I think, clearly his Tokyo Compression project was an influence on the Night Bus book. So I'm going to show you a few images from 3 different projects. This is from the Architecture of Density, which shows photographs of high-rise flats, accommodation tower blocks in Hong Kong. And I love the way that he fills the frame, that they kind of become an abstract repetition. They become a pattern, a graphic image, as much as they are a document. But they are still documents of real Hong Kong architecture, and that's the important thing, and that's why I'm including him in this series. This is an image from the Transparent City, where he used a long lens to shoot in through the windows of offices and residential homes. Again, not traditional street photography, and I'm not saying go out and do what Michael is doing, but you could see scenes like this when you're out and about doing your own street photography. And I just think being aware of artists like this who are working on the edges of street photography is going to give you more to draw upon to be creative in your own work. And I think that's what I'm interested in, and that's what I'm showing you this work for. And finally, this is from his book Tokyo Compression, which is commuters, people traveling on the Tokyo underground or subway. Very painterly, very beautiful, and a very interesting contribution to the sort of documentary photographic genre from cities. So if we take this candid public photography definition of street photography, then all of this work by these photographers who are working on the edge of photography, photojournalism and art and perhaps conceptual work, they all have something to contribute, and they could all potentially fall under that umbrella. So next time you're in a public place with your camera, don't just think of yourself as a street photographer, think of yourself as an artist. Take off those blinkers, climb out of that goldfish bowl of street photography, and start drawing upon things outside of the street photography world and community. Start looking at photography from outside our genre, perhaps drawing upon fine art, drawing upon sculpture, illustration, music. It could be anything which cross-pollinates with your own street photography and takes you down a new and interesting avenue. I mean, all those photographers that I've just shown you, I would consider to be leaders rather than followers. They are all, have the courage of their own convictions, and they've all produced quite unique and unusual work as a result. So I think it's probably time to grab your camera and get out there.